Throughout the history of Star Wars, many a scientist made groundbreaking discoveries that pushed the limits of what technology could do. Some of these, like the invention of the hyperdrive or the airspeeder, made society a better place to live in. Unfortunately, however, many scientists didn't set out with the goal of improving life for everyone in the galaxy. In fact, many of them were several fries short of a Happy Meal and desperately needed some psych meds. We're talking, of course, about mad scientists, depraved men and women who use science to carry out horrific experiments and push the limits of science for evil. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at some of the worst the galaxy had to offer throughout its history. Just to keep things interesting, we're also not going to include the Sith. They were, after all, by definition insane, and Sith alchemy was exclusively designed to create abominations. Instead, we're going to look at the run-of-the-mill men and women who, even without the Force, managed to rival the Sith themselves in their monstrosity. So settle in, grab a cup of tea, and let's talk about some evil scientists.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
For our first entry, let's travel back in time to the time of the Cold War between the Galactic Republic and the reconstituted Sith Empire, and more specifically to the planet of Decevro in the Tyon hegemony, where a scientist was born with auspices far beyond sanity. Enter Dr. Sanz Llorik, a human born to the 37 families of Decevro, a number of noble houses that were the rivals of the Tyon hegemony's ruling royal family. During the Cold War, the Tyon hegemony was an independent nation, and both the Galactic Republic and the true Sith negotiated with it for support of its rich families. In the decades before the Cold War, Dr. Lorrick had worked his way up to the position of a royal science advisor on Decevro, and he took advantage of his position's power to conduct illegal genetic experiments focused on viral modification and gene splicing. Eventually, he was discovered and ousted. At the time his work was brought to light, he had 15 specimens in his lab that had been so horrifically mutated by his experiments that their original species couldn't even be identified, much less proven to be sentient. On this technicality, he was let go and simply exiled from the Tyon hegemony rather than imprisoned and charged with a crime. As most mad scientists tend to do, Lorrick took this poorly and vowed revenge. After his exile, he relocated to a laboratory on Ord Mantell and began experimenting on the viral strain responsible for the Rakghoul disease. For those not familiar with the disease, the Rakghoul plague was initially created by a Sith alchemist in his quest to live forever. The viral strain developed by this Sith, Canis Mur, however, didn't exactly grant one eternal life. Instead, after a new victim was exposed to the virus through an infected wound, the victim would go through an incredibly painful transformation within 6 to 48 hours, eventually turning into a Rakghoul, a mindless Sith mutant that only cared about mauling living beings. In his lab on Ord Mantell, Lorrick claimed to his assistants that he was researching a cure for the disease. During this period of galactic history, Rakghouls were a serious problem on Taris, where they roamed the Undercity and interfered with any and all attempts to reclaim the toxic world. But Lorrick wasn't researching a cure. Instead, he was working on weaponizing the disease even more and modifying the virus to more easily cross the species barrier. In 3639 BBY, Lorrick got his revenge. He hired pilots to fly creatures infected with the Rakghoul plague to several worlds in the Tyon hegemony. The resulting outbreak saw 5 worlds in the hegemony completely overrun, and the outbreak seemed out of control until quarantine measures were implemented to keep the virus from spreading even further. Kaon was the 5th world to be hit by the virus, and although many civilians were able to be evacuated, the planet was soon overrun by the Rakghouls. Even though quarantine protocols prevented the entire hegemony from being lost to the plague, countless military personnel and civilians were killed by the disease. But Lorrick didn't stop there. Despite getting his revenge on the Tyonese, he wanted to go even further, looking to spread the Rakghoul plague across the entire galaxy. He gifted Zama Brak, a smuggler, an infected Risp without letting him know about the creature's condition. Not long after, the Risp transformed into a Rakghoul and went ballistic aboard his ship, infecting many of the crew and killing others. The ship, the Star Dream, was forced into a crash landing on Tatooine, where another outbreak began. By now, the galaxy was experiencing a pandemic that threatened civilization itself. Back on Ord Mantell, Lorrick's assailants finally discovered what his work was really about and tried to stop him, but failed. Instead, Lorrick infected them with the Rakghoul virus and kept them in test tubes. After the Tyne hegemony outbreak had been contained, people were able to track the outbreak back to Lorrick and his Ord Mantell base. A strike team was dispatched to the island laboratory where they had to fight through Lorrick's abominations to take the Doctor out. It turned out, however, that Lorrick had gone beyond just improving the virus. He had modified it enough to be able to turn it into a weapon, infecting himself and transforming in a bid to kill the strike team. In the end, however, his transformation wasn't enough and the strike team took him down. Even with his successful assassination, Lorrick had spread the disease far beyond the Taris Undercity, causing the death of thousands and putting millions more at risk. Following his death, the Highland Organization for Rakghoul Neutralization, known as Thorn, had to put in overtime to manage outbreaks on worlds such as Corellia and Tatooine to prevent the plague from infecting the entire galaxy. Our next entry takes us to Pao City during the time of the Galactic Civil War, when one med student decided to play God and create a cruel fusion of droid and organics that would terrorize the galaxy. The scientist in question was Phaazem Gor, a med student at Prastine Brak, a prestigious medical academy on Utapau. After graduation, Gor and his friend and fellow student, Gristo Truck, had plans to open a surgical center in the capital. However, fate had other plans for the two auspicious surgeons. Not even a month after they opened their surgery, a group of Pauan gunmen stormed the building and took them hostage alongside one of their Class 1 medical droids. The three were taken away into the plains, where the Pauan raiding parties were concentrated. When Truck dared to ask if they were members of the gang known as the Wandering Star, he got a blaster bolt to the chest. The group was attacked by Utapau raiders, however, who killed the armed gunmen holding them hostage. Gor managed to take 7 out of 8 raiders out, taking the last one prisoner. With the help of his medical droid, he hauled the prisoner and his dying friend to a nearby cave where shenanigans began. Not wanting to lose his friend, he tried experimenting on him to save his life. He combined Truck's body with the medical droid, creating a cyborg that was droid-based with organic limbs connected. This droid became known as Number 1, and it was only the beginning. After Truck's death, Gor began working with the Wandering Star, who were somehow completely oblivious to the fact that Gor might hold a grudge for what they put him through. This, as you can imagine, was a mistake. Gor quickly became obsessed with cybernetic experiments, focusing his entire career on fusing droids and organic matter in what he called the biomechanical union of flesh and circuits. Number 1 was incorporated into a weapon system named the Phalanx Redux Transmitter, which was essentially a system that could transmit a computer virus to nearby droids. When infected with the virus, droids would be reprogrammed to attack and kill any organic near them. In 3 BBY, the Wandering Star tried to sell the transmitter in an auction on Cantonica, and Gor seemingly went along with it. When they were on Cantonica, however, he activated the transmitter and got all the gang members killed, enacting his revenge. As you can imagine, neither the Galactic Empire nor the Alliance were keen on Gor's work. After the incident on Cantonica, the Millennium Falcon crew pursued him and were able to destroy the transmitter, at least so they believed. 10 years later, however, Gor threatened to unleash a droid apocalypse on Cloud City if the stolen transmitter wasn't returned. Lando Calrissian and the Millennium Falcon crew eventually hunted down the transmitter, which had survived their previous attempts to destroy it and gone rogue. Destroying both it and Gor's secret research facility finally neutralized him once and for all. Even then though, the damage was already done. Gor's research was pioneering in all the wrong ways. Later on, a droid known simply as the Scourge used Gor's work as an inspiration to create a number of cyborgs that, after processing, would give the Scourge access to the Force. This was very much not ideal and caused a number of other problems, but that whole mess is a story for another day. But we're not leaving the Galactic Civil War period just yet. Our next entry is somehow an even worse doctor than Dr. Gor, and his patients met with an even worse fate, if that's even possible. We're talking about Dr. Cornelius Evazan, an absolute mad lad. Emphasis on the mad. Evazan was born on the Ecumenopolis of Alsakan, most likely a decade or two before the Clone Wars broke out. Although Evazan went by his title of doctor wherever he went, it's not actually clear if he ever earned a real medical degree. Nevertheless, he worked as a surgeon, and by all accounts, he wasn't half bad at his job. That is, at least, until he went berserk. During the time of the Galactic Empire, he applied to the Imperial Academy and, believe it or not, failed the Psych Eval. Yes, you heard that right. An Imperial officer deemed Evazan too insane to be accepted into the Imperial military, an organization not exactly famous for its scruples and mental health awareness.